Fellow Chelsea supporters, we are back for part two of our special tribute episode for Gianluca Vialli. I've got three distinguished guests with me this evening. Mark Nicholls, former Chelsea striker who was a teammate of Gianluca Vialli's. Ade Mafe, who was the fitness coach for Gianluca Vialli in the late 90s. And Dave, who was the photographer slash Chelsea season ticket holder that went to home and away, that travelled to especially in the 98 Cup Winners' Cup triumph. Gentlemen, before we sort of went to depart because my laptop was deciding to play games with me, we was talking about the time when Vialli took over from Chelsea from Ruud Gullit, and Adi, you was talking about sort of when you heard the news, what was happening with Ruud, and Mark, when in the dressing room, it must have been a huge shock for you guys to know, what the change was going to be. But gentlemen, sort of in your own words, just to sort of reconvene the chat, did you feel when you saw Vialli at Harlington or you saw Vialli play that you thought he could become a decent coach in the future?
Yeah, I did. He had all the attributes. Look at the experience he had, where he'd played. I thought it was probably a natural progression for him. It affected me quite a bit, really, due to the fact that when Ruud was in charge, there was statements that he made in the paper that I could play in the San Siro tomorrow and not be phased. I had a sort of a persona about me that he liked. When Ruud went, obviously Luca took over, and being a roommate with him, we go back through the records. I didn't really play a lot under Luca, but learnt a lot off of him, if that makes sense. He had his own views, and it don't matter what standard of football, like we spoke about earlier, if they have their own way about it and they like you as a player or they don't like you as a player. You see it now, like we was chatting about Cucurella. Like, he's come in, Graham Potter was the one that sold him, I believe, from Brighton. So he's already on the back foot at Chelsea now. There must have been a reason behind it. But yeah, in my view, 100% he was going to become the manager he was. He was a natural progression of where we were going around it earlier with the Italian and the side and the discipline and the changing of foods and the changing of training and doing double sessions, etc., etc. I remember training when, how do I tell you, we were doing single sessions. We were coming in at 10 o'clock and we were back home by sort of like 1. Yeah. When he took over and Ruud were there, they brought in the double sessions, the staying in a hotel and coming back for a session, etc., etc. So, it was a natural progression for me. It didn't work out for me when he took over. I ended up going out on loan to a couple of places. But what I learned off of him, football-wise and knowledge and basically the way he carried himself, you couldn't ask for any more in my eyes. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Nico. The only thing I'll say to that is when you're a player and then you get given the job of player manager and have to make the decision to leave players out or move players around or play players, it's I think it can be quite damaging to your relationship with other players. And
100%.
He wasn't, Mark, you weren't the only one that he had problems with once he became a manager, because he had to change his persona, because there was a day on game day he had to say, right, you're playing and you're not. And it was difficult for him, especially I think it's even harder when you're actually on the field and you're playing, to worry about your own performance and then the performance of everybody else in the team. So, it was difficult, but you can't, as I say, if you think about the changes that were going on at the time, there were a lot of changes in a lot of different areas. And obviously the culmination of all that was the winning streak that he went on, and resulting in the eventual qualification for the Champions League. you know, but it was. I've always said it was a crux time. It was such a changing time in Chelsea Football Club at that time, and it was the different type of players, the different nationalities were all coming together, and the club was profiting from the best of it. And
it was
I was honoured.
Time for Chelsea in that era, wasn't it? It was either going to happen or it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And fortunately enough for Chelsea and everybody that came through in that time, it happened, and now look where it is.
Yeah.
It was the chance, like you say, when you was in as fitness coach and you was kept on as fitness coach, and the whole world at Chelsea became a different world.
Yeah. Can I just say again, thanks to Glenn Hoddle, because he brought in Hullet, didn't he, Vialli, and that was incredible, and it under the days of Hoddle, he changed everything. And sadly, all right, might have been a good thing that he got the England job, because we went from strength to strength there under Hullet and Vialli. So, you know, we won major trophies, and 94 cup final, that was devastating for me. You know what I mean? We lost that at Man United at Wembley, the old Wembley. That was devastating day. But yeah, we just grew and grew, and then we started bringing in some real quality players in Hullet, Vialli, and we, you know, Mark Hughes. Watching them players come in were mind blowing at Arlington. You know, a place like that where you were seeing Ruud Hullet and Mark Hughes and Zola, and then Di Matteo, Poyet, and then you guys coming in as well. You know what I mean? Watching Mark Nicholls come into the first team was great. Watching him come up as a kid, they were fantastic days. And we just grew and grew and grew. And then Roman took over, didn't he? And we even got bigger then. And that's where we went on to massive things. So European Cups then.
Well, I was going to say 1998 was a big year for Chelsea in terms of with Vialli taking over as manager. His first game was the second leg in the League Cup against Arsenal. We managed to beat them comfortably. Di Matteo scored a cracking goal, scored in the Matthew Harding end. And then within weeks of taking the job, he takes Chelsea to Wembley. We win the League Cup. Di Matteo scores as well as Frank Sinclair to beat Middlesbrough 2-0. And again, as you said, Mark, sort of earlier, nothing really changed from when Ruud was in charge to Vialli. It didn't seem that there was any downside. It wasn't a case of, players are not now performing because we've got our best mate or, you know, a good teammate of ours becoming the coach. It seemed to have basically just carried on where it left off.
Yeah, just prepared and went forward. It's the snowball effect, isn't it? Like, if that snowball's going down the hill, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's what it is. And there wasn't really any sort of drop off when he took over. Some players' faces fit, some players' faces don't. That's football. That's life. But it was always going to. I could never see it. I could never see it go the other way. Do you know what I mean? They were only going to look forward, and it was only going to ever progress forward. When he took over, it was only going to go in one direction, in my eyes.
And we've already talked before about the great memories of that 98 Cup Winners' Cup run. But even in the semi-final against Vincenza, when we had to come back from, I believe we was 1-0 down at the bridge, Hughes scored that great goal at the Matthew Harding end, and then Zola with that terrific goal, sending us into the final. Gentlemen, obviously, I was obviously too young to support Chelsea. I was a Chelsea fan, but I was too young to remember. At that time, did you still feel that there was a huge buzz growing at Chelsea, whereby we've got to a Cup Winners' Cup final? We was becoming basically a cup team in terms of we've won the FA Cup the year before, League Cup already in the bag. And again, because of this, Vialli's building something. Did you see a bit of a change in the attitude with Vialli and how he related to the players because of the fact that we were winning matches and cups?
I will say, I think the ball started rolling with Glenn Hoddle.
Yeah,
as David said, it started rolling with Glenn Hoddle. Glenn Hoddle brought in players, and I think as Mark has talked about it, the snowball effect has started, and it started there, and you could see through Hullet, through Vialli, through all the way, and it's got bigger and bigger and bigger, and now you can see that the club is the way it is at the moment. But that progression was seamless. It was continuous all the way through. I just feel like, there wasn't, as I said, I remember when I got the job, there was one guy at Nottingham Forest, and he said, I want to do Nottingham Forest and Chelsea. And Ruud said, no, you can't do both. You got to do one or the other. And he chose Nottingham Forest, and I got the job, and it was all sort of fixed, and it went on and on and on. And then obviously I thought I was out when Ruud got sacked, and then he said, no, I want you to stay on. I want you to work with Antonio Pintus, and we want to go on from there. And then for me, it was just a natural progression, and the team never really changed. It changed maybe on the edges, but it never really changed. The core of the team was the same, and it just continued on, and it went on to the successes that Luca had. It went on to the successes that even culminated in Mourinho and Di Matteo winning the league and winning the Champions League. It's all part of that progression, and obviously now it's about staying there, and sometimes that's actually harder than getting there. You can see now that the team is struggling to stay in that at the top, whereas maybe going from the bottom all the way up was a little bit more. There were so many more progressions going that way, so many more steps in the right direction, and I think it was a great time. It was a really great time for everybody involved.
If you go on to that, what you're saying there, so we're talking about whether there was a transition period, would it have slacked off, this, that, and the other. But it just proves what caliber of man that Vialli was, that there was no drop off.
No.
Can I just say, I was there in 1983, and we were bottom of the second division, and you see the transform of Chelsea Football Club from them days, from John Neal for what he done. He was a magnificent manager, and then you see John Hollins come in, and we got worse and worse under Hollins. Porterfield came in, and then you guys started to slowly come in, and then Bates brought Hoddle in, and that was it. And then you had Hullet and Vialli, and that was just unreal. It was like being the old days in the 70s when we won the FA Cup and the Cup Winners' Cup. It was bringing all that back, It was great, brilliant. But Vialli and Hullet, I think they were fantastic. I was absolutely flabbergasted when Hullet got the sack. I really was, because I think that's the best football we've ever played. I think under Hullet, I think it was so good, that football.
It's funny hearing from a true fan.
Yeah.
How he's so pleased with the way it's developed. And then talking to people and talking to people who were involved in the development of it.
Yeah.
But I think, the spark was started by Glenn. And
definitely.
That spark is now a fire,
definitely. Yeah.
And it's like it's a fire, and it's blazing, and it's just going to continue to blaze.
From Glenn to Hullet took it a further mile, and he brought in some magnificent footballers. Hullet, and oh my God, what football was that? That was that 97 Cup final, man. That was just unreal, wasn't it? And the Di Matteo goal, that was got to be one of the best goals ever in our history, isn't it?
I just remember I'd walked all the way around to the bench, and he said to me, and Sparky goes, I forgot my socks. So I had to run all the way back to the dressing room.
Oh, you didn't miss it.
Socks. And then as I was running back out of the tunnel, everyone was going mad. And I was like,
you missed it.
What's that?
Oh no.
No. And then Di Matteo's put the ball in there. Oh
my God.
By the time I got to the bench, I sat down, I'm thinking, we got the whole game to go. Oh my God.
We were sitting by the bench there in the corner bit. Yeah. Oh, we went absolutely mental that day. Honestly,
it was a mad day. That was absolutely mad day.
Right. We waited so long for that trophy. It was incredible.
Oh God, yeah.
Another key point, gentlemen, I wanted to raise with you with 98, and although people do they class it as a friendly, I think it's still very significant in the history of Chelsea Football Club, which all three of you played a part at, especially at Harlington, was when we beat Real Madrid in the UEFA Super Cup.
I was there.
Now, bearing in mind, you know, people sort of say the Super Cups are friendly. We still beat Real Madrid, who won the Champions League this previous season.
And what a team they were.
Poyet scored the winner, and it just seemed that spell from when Vialli took over from '98, and we're going to talk about the '99-2000 season in a minute. It just seemed that every single sort of stone was being put in place, and Chelsea were going up and up and up. Yeah, we didn't have the finances such as like Arsenal or Man United, you know, have had, but we were building something properly. And you know, Gianluca brought in some, you know, top names. You know, not players that were past their best or, you know, players that were just coming for Chelsea for a payday. He was bringing in some, you know, top names. People like Marcel Desailly, Albert Ferrer. Later on, he brought in Didier Deschamps, which we'll talk about later. But it just seemed that Vialli was becoming, you know, used to the job. Was there Mark, you'll probably know this more than anybody. Was there potential talk within that dressing room in that era about Chelsea potentially mounting a title challenge because of the success we've had in the Cups? There was potential talk about maybe putting it into the league and building a side, because we also brought in Ed De Hoy as well in that period, who had a good reputation. Melchiot as well, sort of in the late '90s. Mark, was there any sort of talk about Vialli could be the guy to, you know, make a title challenge out of this squad?
When you say talk about challenging for the title, between the players that he brought in were world-class players. They were people that you'd want on your side, if you know what I mean. But the caliber of player that he brought in, they would not talk about things like that. So your Marcel Desailly, Frank Leboeuf, etc. You're talking about players that have played at such a high standard. They wouldn't let that overall what they're doing. You know, if it was a few youngsters that were in here, you might have got that. You might have got that in their head. They'd be going, "Oh, we're title challengers next year. We'll do this, we'll do that." But with the experience that he brought in and the world-class players that he got in, them thoughts didn't really come out in the changing room. It was a case of, we're progressing. When we get there, we will get there. But going back to the Super Cup, so I missed out on the Cup Winners' Cup in the squad, so I didn't get changed. So I missed out. I was in and around it for the whole way up, and then on the actual final, so I didn't get changed. There's a picture I saw recently of me in my suit behind celebrating as well. We've also got, when they went to the Super Cup, I wasn't in the squad again, but Vialli gave me his medal.
Wow.
So Super Cup medal that I have, he gave me. So that's the type of person you're talking about.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the type of thing he would do.
And
that lovely guy.
Yeah,
lovely guy.
That's where we're at with how I feel about him, and he obviously understood that I wasn't in and around it at the time, and whether or not he fancied me as a player is regardless. But to walk over to me knowing that I missed out on the obviously the final, and then obviously going to the Super Cup, knowing that I missed out the squad and didn't get changed on either, he had the time and the and what I call class about him to walk over to me and actually hand it to me and say, "That's yours." So
that's made me go cold, Mark. That's brilliant. What a man. What a man. Absolutely brilliant.
I think that says everything.
Yeah, but going back to whether or not they were going for titles and pushing for winning the league, that you'll back me up here, Ade. It's not. It wasn't talked about. It was just a natural progression of when we get there, we get there. It weren't a case of.
I think for me, it was just about success.
Yeah.
They just wanted success. They just wanted to play well. They wanted to win. They wanted success. It wasn't, the objectives weren't talked about. We just wanted to get there.
Yeah.
And you could see that by the players who was bringing in, Marcel coming in, Albert coming in, Didier coming in. It was just about progressing and playing at that top level and success. That's all they wanted.
But I think also with him bringing in that type of player, I believe, whether it was subconsciously or not, or he knew what he was doing to that extent, that the players he was bringing in was obviously going to develop the youngsters that were coming through.
Yeah.
You're not in a sort of 3-4 million. You're bringing in World Cup winners. You're bringing in people that have played at the top level, AC Milan's playing wherever you like. So subconsciously or not, he knew what he was doing in the fact that we were all going to learn off of your Zola, off of your Di Matteos, off of your Poyets as well. So it was sort of like an education, but a disguised education.
Yeah.
So he's very clever.
I remember a very young John Terry.
I was just about to mention that.
Being asked by Gianluca Vialli to train with the first team.
Yeah.
And in the first game, he's actually gone over and he smashed. Luca's got the ball and he smashed Luca, and, you know, typical John Terry tackle. Wham. Yeah. And we're all like, oh my God, do you know what?
I was there. I remember that.
You know what you're doing, John? Yeah. And that, I think that was a day where we knew that this guy is going to be something special.
Yeah.
You know.
And in the cold at Arlington, he would turn up in shorts and a t-shirt, John Terry, wouldn't he? Yeah. Mid-December, January, February, it would be -2 or 3 there.
Yeah.
He'd still walk out at training with t-shirt and shorts
John.
on. He was so hard.
I could tell you a few things about John. Oh my God.
Well, Gianluca gave.
So can I, but I won't.
I was just going to say, gentlemen, Gianluca gave JT his debut in the League Cup against Aston Villa. Yeah. And he made his Premier League debut coming on as a sub against Southampton on Boxing Day in '98. It's amazing to think that it was Vialli giving JT the debut, and it was a great touch that JT was there last in the game against Crystal Palace. You know, showing his respect. Seeing Gianluca see an eye for a player, you know, it wasn't just him as a footballer or as a coach. He had his eye on very good talent, and you can see that not just from, you know, bringing players in from overseas, but looking at the academy and giving players like John Terry, Nick Crittington as well. He was, I believe, was a fullback, wasn't he? He was a young fullback.
I mean, there's a name from the past.
Giving him an opportunity, and also, you know, giving Mark Nicholls, you know, yourself, Mark, you know. Staying in the squad, learning from the likes of Zola, Hughes, Kazaragi as well, who came in that summer of '98. I mean, it wasn't just, for example, his own, you know, ego, you know, trying to build here. He was helping a lot of people out as the coach.
Yeah, it's like I say. Whether it was some subconscious or not, he knew what he was doing. He knew what players were coming through, and this is where we had the conversation at the start, where he would make time for the youngsters. He would be knowledgeable for the youngsters. He would also be able to watch the sessions, and the reserves would have been training on the pitch next to him. So even when he finished, if we were still training, he would still be. It's not. He did never not pay attention to no one. So that's why I believe you got your likes of John Terry come through. Obviously, Jody as well. So you're looking at that era. So he was very attentive to like detail, etc., and he wanted the youngsters to know that he was watching. You know, it was. Like, I'll stand there, I'll keep an eye on you for a little while in preparation, maybe for when he wanted to become a manager. It happened to come quicker than he probably wanted, but he already had an idea of what he had around him coming through. And again, that just shows how professional he was.
He brought the best out of John Terry, because I was there when John Terry when he was young, like you, Mark. And I watched him come up from a 14-year-old. Then he went to Forest on loan for 6 months. And he wasn't the player he was then. But when he came back, my God, what a different player he was. He was the John Terry we know of this day, you know what I mean? And I don't know if you've seen the video of him at Liverpool today. I put it on my Facebook,
Yeah,
and
I've
he's with
seen-
all the Chelsea fans today. Go mental.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So
I've seen
absolutely
Liverpool.
brilliant. Vialli done wonders with John Terry. Absolute wonders. Yeah. So yeah, what
And
a
it
player he
propelled
turned out
John
to be.
Terry to learn from the likes of Marcel Desailly as well, having
Yeah,
him
yeah,
learn from a World Cup winner.
yeah,
I think
And that all started with Vialli. You know, a lot of
yeah,
people,
yeah. It's all
a lot
Vialli.
of
Yeah,
people seem to forget about that. You know, how certain players became who they are today. It all
Yeah.
started from somebody, and that
Yep.
somebody, thankfully, was Gianluca.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you could see John Terry, the tears in his eyes, just dropping the flowers down at Stamford Bridge last week. You know what I mean? It meant so much to him. Well, all of us as well. We met up last week, Mark, didn't we? Talking about it, and we were just with Keith in the pub. You know, we were just devastated. All of us were absolutely devastated.
And we were sort of going back to going from the 99-2000 season, sort of fast forwarding. How big of an influence was it for Gianluca to bring someone like Ray Wilkins in as coach? Obviously,
Massive.
certain situations with Graham Ricks, Ray Wilkins came in sort of to replace him for the short/long term, but it just seemed that that was a great fit for Gianluca and Ray Wilkins, obviously with the Italian connection as well. Mark, how good of a partnership was that on the training field with Ray coming in and players learning from not just Gianluca, but Ray Wilkins was a fabulous player as well.
Yeah, so if you look at what Luca is, class individual, it is the same as what Ray Wilkins was. Class individual, polite gentleman.
Lovely guy.
What's a player? I remember being out on a training ground once, and it might have been me and Jody with Ray just pinging balls about after training, and it'd be a little bit of banter, and if you struck a good one to Ray and it was about like 4 inch off the floor, you'd go, "Oh, Ray, how's that?" And he would ping it back on his weaker foot and say, "How's that?" You know.
What a player he was. What a player he was. Yeah.
When you go on to how Luca is and how respectful, gentleman, classy individual he is, as well as a legend of football, you bring in Ray Wilkins, it is mirror image, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Classy, gentleman, legend of a footballer, So that's
and a
why,
great coach. Great coach. Wilkins was a brilliant coach.
But that's what Luca surrounded himself by. So he surrounded himself with people that had the same mentality, had the same vision, So it was a good partnership. But there's some good memories there.
And also the fitness coaches were good as well. Someone called Ade Mafe. And I could see that from previous seasons with managers. We never had coaches like this. We just had the manager and the assistant manager. Not a coach out there. They would do it all. People like Ade came in. Fitness, everything came in, didn't they?
Well, it seemed a good blend, didn't it? To have the continental style come into English football, and then you'd have Ade with his background in athletics and with his way of doing fitness sessions. It just seemed a great blend, and it seemed that we was the forward-thinking club that a lot of clubs spent years after trying to get to in terms of the nutrition, the fitness, the training. It just seemed that Chelsea were one of those pioneers in that era, and that did again fall down to the likes of Hoddle, Hullet, and Vialli.
Yeah,
to start that off in the Premier League.
You said it perfectly.
I didn't.
How we have taken on the foreign ethos and changed the way. I mean, Premiership football at that time, there were people at the top of it, and it changed the whole ball game. Literally from the ground upwards. Bringing in fitness coaches now, every club has got one. I was a personal trainer at the time, and he just said, "I want you to do what we do with our players." That's all he said, and I was like, "Yeah, sure, I can do that." Next bit I know, 10 years of Chelsea Football Club. But that's what it was. And that was part of the progression. That was part of the steps upwards and to the great club that we have today. And, as we've said so many times, we were very happy to be part of that progression. You know, and you can look at it now, and our club is where it is at the moment. Hopefully we'll come through this transition a better club for it.
Yeah.
100%. I didn't really like the boxes after games if I was on the bench. So
Who does? What
No.
player does enjoy boxes, mate? Come on, seriously.
But like what you said there, mate, he's when it started at Arsenal, obviously under Arsene Wenger, and he started to bring that ethos in, and Chelsea obviously recognised it. They were sort of 2 steps in front of everybody else.
Yeah.
And that's why that snowball effect continued.
Yeah.
And that's why it progressed as quickly as it did and then ended where they are now.
I mean, if you think about it, Razor Ruddock, Jan Mulby, come on, all big players, but what did they do? They were all in the pub having their pie mash and all, you know, they did all that stuff. Whereas Chelsea, you had Dennis Wise, you had it was all about fitness and eating right and performance, and it was all right at the time. And then all those ethoses have now been, you can see Chelsea were 2 steps ahead of everybody else.
Yeah. You know, when Hoddle was manager and he took the England job, he went up to Bates and said, Arsene Wenger, get him from Monaco, is absolutely brilliant. And Bates, he never went with it, did he? So he went on with Luca and Hullet. So in a way, it was a good thing, but I wonder what would happen if we'd have got Arsene Wenger. Yeah, well, yeah.
What might have been. It's interesting. I was going through the 99-2000 squad and looking at players that Vialli brought in, and one name, and again, he was there last week, Mark. I know he was there. I think he was standing on your side of the pitch at Stamford Bridge. He brought in Carlo Cudicini for about £100,000. He brought him in. Again, nobody heard of him. You know, it was seemed that he was going to be the backup goalkeeper to Ed De Hoy. What a, looking back, what a signing that was. Again, a real eye for talent, and again, he's made his name with Chelsea. He's a Chelsea icon, Carlo, and bringing in people like Didier Deschamps from overseas, and then George Ware, sort of in January of 2000. Again, George Ware, who if any young people are watching this who only know of George Ware after his footballing exploits, look him up on YouTube. He was sensational. Yeah. All these big names coming in from the influence of Vialli and Ray Wilkins. I mean, Christ, it was a fantastic time to be part of Chelsea Football Club in that era.
Oh, yeah. But I think, if you think about Chelsea, even in English football, it was one of the bigger teams. It actually progressed to be one of the best teams in England. And so you did have a time that we were attractive and people wanted to come here. George wanted to come here. Didier wanted to come here. And so it was easy to attract big name players from abroad. And then, as I said, then the biggest thing for me is the country, the town that you're in. That does make a difference to players. And obviously they all wanted to come to London, and the biggest team, one of the bigger teams in London, Chelsea Football Club.
Chelsea.
If you think about it, in London, you've got Arsenal and you've got Chelsea. So, really.
Just looking at the players he brought in, I've just got a list here, and he even brought in Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank and Good Johnson as well. He brought in as well. You remember that?
Yes, that was the sort of the later season. But one player One player I did want to discuss. Obviously, we've talked about Vialli's exploits in the transfer market. One player that perhaps didn't go well was somebody who took his number 9 shirt from him after Vialli decided to, concentrate more on the coaching. Was Chris Sutton. Now, Mark, I believe you were still part of that squad when Chris came in.
Yeah.
Obviously, Vialli did gamble a lot on Chris coming into the club. I think Chelsea spent quite a bit on him to come in because Kaziragi the year before had the injury and then had to retire. Was there an element of frustration that things just didn't work out for Chris, knowing that basically he was Vialli's replacement as the main sort of Chelsea's number 9? Was there a little bit of a frustration that you saw within the players and Vialli? Was there a little bit of
look, at the end of the day, footballing decisions are made. Yeah. So at the time, it was obviously right for Chris he felt it was right to come. Sometimes things don't work out. That's life in football. There's been plenty of signings and throughout the years gone by, and there will be plenty of signings in the future where it just doesn't actually work for that player.
Vincent Bogard.
Yeah,
Vialli brought both of them in. Bogart, the laziest player I've ever seen at Arlington.
Yeah,
Dear.
Sometimes it just doesn't work out, and frustrations from the player is obviously going to be frustrated. He wanted to come in and smash in goals and become that focal point and the number 9. And obviously with Vialli signing him, he obviously thought that was the focal point, the number 9. He's going to come in and smash goals in for me and be what I want him to be. But sometimes it just doesn't work. It's going to happen in the future. It's happened in the past, and it'll happen like now. But it's just the way it is. There's no frustration at the club at the time from anybody. It just happens, and like anybody will tell you, it's not. It's life in football. There's been plenty of moves, and we all know about these moves where people go, "Oh, what a signing that'd be! What a signing that'd be!" And it just don't fit.
I was just going to say to that, I think Kazaragi was going to be the man, and I think him breaking his leg and retiring forced the whole club to go, "Oh, we need to get somebody else. We need to get another 9. Where are we going to get another 9? Another number 9 from?" And Chris was playing really well with Blackburn, so Chris came, and as you said, it didn't quite work out. You know, but Chris's mentality when he came to the club was that I'm going to bang in goals. I'm going to continue what I was doing at Blackburn in a better team with better players. That's what he was thinking. And as you said, that's life. This is life. How it works out. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And I think for Chris, it didn't.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. He didn't turn up and go. You don't become a bad player overnight.
No, you don't.
So at the end of the day, the system might not have suited him.
It could be anything.
The same did at Blackburn, you know. He might at times he was possibly playing as a one up front on his own and being the target man and not getting in the box.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, you're playing with Alan Shearer, so you're like, okay. Now you're not. You're playing on your own. Ooh, maybe it's not so as easy as it was because Alan's not around.
Spot on.
You know, so it's a completely different ball game where he is now, and obviously at Chelsea it didn't quite work out. You know, but not that he didn't think it was not going to.
No,
he wouldn't have thought that when the offer was put on the table for him. He was like, "Oh yeah, definitely, great chance for me, great chance, opportunity to go and do some more."
Yeah.
Well, he scored that goal against Man United, didn't he, at Stamford Bridge when we won 5-0, and it just seemed that at that point things might work out for him a little bit. You know, it was a good goal as well from Sutton, but as you said, some transfers work out, some transfers don't. I mean, we could talk for the next 2 days about Chelsea signings that haven't worked out. But what I did want to mention though, and it was around about this period, and again, you know, one of the great sort of times to be a Chelsea fan was the Champions League season when it was Chelsea's time to be in the European elite. And Mark, you played actually the Champions League qualifying game in, I believe, forgive me, Skonto Riga. I believe that's the name of it. You know, but again, Chelsea in the Champions League, it wasn't a regular thing back then. You know, this was a huge time for Chelsea, and they had somebody as manager in Gianluca who won it a few years ago. They had players in the team that have won it, like Desailly, Didier Deschamps, for example. Did it just seem that Chelsea at that stage were made to be part of that European adventure?
If you look at the players that came in and the experience they brought in, they've all done there, been there, seen it, and done it. So it was a natural progression. It was a forward step for the club. So the aim is where they are, and they've won it, and you know that was the natural progression for the club. And the players and the backing, obviously, with money helps, granted, but Chelsea never wanted to go backwards after Vialli. They didn't go backwards. All they wanted to do was keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing, and it was a natural progression to go forward. They wanted to become that elite side. They wanted to become. It wasn't going to happen overnight. We all know that it wasn't going to happen overnight. Squads take time to be built. You need to gel. You need the right manager. You need a bit of backing. Everybody knows that. But Chelsea were never going to go backwards. They was always going to go forwards. The only thing that they don't want to do is stagnate and become stale and not move, you know, which where I feel they're at the moment is the transition period. Obviously, Graham Potter wants to get his own players in. Some of the Tuchel players are still there. So it's going to be a transition period, but you still need to move forward. And top four is the minimum. And that is what Chelsea fans expect. So that needs to, the ball still needs to roll forward. I just hope it doesn't like stagnate and stay where it is. It has to keep rolling.
But it all sort of stemmed with the culmination of winning the trophies and beating Madrid and doing well in the league, because there was a time where we were beating Liverpool. We drew. I think there was a game against Manchester United at Old Trafford. We drew 1-1. Zola dinked it over Schmeichel after Man United scored first. So we was doing quite well. It was, we was going on a nice little run, and then, going up against AC Milan at Stamford Bridge, going up against Galatasaray at their place and winning 5-0. It did seem Vialli was, had the trick of pretty much everything, and even players. Mark, you've obviously got good friends with them. John Harley came on the scene. A young guy came through the youth ranks at Chelsea. He was given his debut by Vialli, and he scored a crucial winner against Leeds United, who were battling for the championship up in that year. Yes. So it just seemed that it did look that Chelsea were building under Vialli, and then the culmination, we didn't do that well in the league that season, but we got to another FA Cup final.
Yeah.
We beat Newcastle in the semi-final. We were going against Aston Villa. And, gentlemen, just sort of the memories of that particular era in that particular game, being able to see Chelsea win the FA Cup and being part of that, because at that time, Chelsea did have a large squad as well. You had players like Kevin Hitchcock that was still there that, although weren't getting games, he was still quite influential in the dressing room and in the squad. What are your memories on that particular occasion when Chelsea, and also it turned out to be the last FA Cup final at the old Wembley?
Yeah, I was there. Brilliant. Yeah, very proud.
We were close, a close knit side. We wasn't. There weren't no cliques. There weren't no divides in it. So we all had each other's backs. We knew what was going on there. We knew that something was going and it was going to be big. Granted, league positions and stuff. We never prioritised. We never turned around and said, "Oh, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go with that. We're going to go with this." It was all about the players on the pitch, the squad members, and some of the players that weren't even involved in the squad. You have to have that backing from everybody. Otherwise, there would have been no team, no push forward, no trophies. And that's where Vialli got it right. He got players that wanted to play for him. He got players that wanted to play for each other. And the fighting spirit obviously showed. So, yeah, there was never a prioritise of anything. It was the best performances you could put on the pitch at the time with the squad that went out there, subs included. And good memories they are. They're all good memories. All of the boys singing and dancing and, everything. It's just what it was. Chelsea were going forward and he started it, and it's just rolled and rolled and rolled.
Ade, what's your memories of sort of that period? Again, when you sort of saw these, star names coming into the Harlington and Vialli and Wilkins, working together, and you've got Chelsea in the Champions League, competing in the Premier League as well, and then having the FA Cup to look forward to as well. Real busy times, but it must have been some fantastic memories into that.
Memories, yes. I would say that Chelsea had proven itself to be a cup team by winning several trophies along the way. And obviously then getting into the Champions League, it was about, okay, we're in the Champions League now. Let's see if we can win. And you can see the progression, because it's not something, it's a hard trophy to win. It's not something you're going to win first year. And you can see how it took us quite a few years before it resulted in that. But you could see that we were winning things. Everything was going really well. Ray Wilkins was brought in. Yeah, Luca, very similar guy, similar attributes. They have great coach, and you could see it was beginning to go in that way, and it was preparing to culminate in the winning of the Champions League. And there were several efforts to do that, but you can see it just took us time to get further and further and further and further. The first time it happened, it was in the future, but we set the stones in the ground, the foundations to do that in the future, which is what we've been talking about. Again, that from Glenn Hoddle all the way through to Ruud Gullit to Vialli, it was all part of the progression. And as I said, we were glad to be part of it. Everyone was from the playing staff. They were united in the playing staff. New players were brought in. The whole idea, the whole progression was top class, and we couldn't really complain about how things were going at that time.
It was all about baby steps. You can't do what Man City have tried to do.
Yeah.
They've to win the Champions League. They've thrown money after money after money, money after, and they still ain't won it. So it's about having them foundations, like you said, and putting them baby steps forward. Yeah, there'll be that time where we've got to make a little bit of a leap, but we didn't go leap. We built it up. So it was a good time for Chelsea Football Club. It was a good time for the fans to see where everything was going.
And
that's what I think.
Sorry, David, I was just going to say that summer of 2000, after winning the FA Cup, you mentioned before, Chelsea brought Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank in, which I believe was a record signing for at the time. He brought in Ida Johnson, a young Ida Johnson as well. Mario Melchiot obviously was starting to get back into the swing of things, because he believed he was severely injured the year before and hardly played the season prior. This season he was sort of coming into his own. We beat Manchester United comfortably in the Wembley in the Charity Shield, and all things seemed to be rosy. But then all of a sudden, results and performances started to get a little bit rocky. And there was one game in particular, I think it was at Arsenal at Stamford Bridge. We were 2-0 up. Hasselbank scored and Zola scored. We seemed to be comfortable, and then all of a sudden, the wheels started to fall off a little bit. And then Silvinho, I think, scored that. I still class it as a fluke now. Although it was a good goal, it seemed like a fluke. But it was that period, it just seemed a little bit, things were going wrong. Did you notice anything sort of at that time, gentlemen, sort of with Vialli, that things weren't looking so rosy in the garden?
For me, no. Managers have a span, don't they, at the moment? And we know that there isn't a lot of managers in the league that are going 10, 15 years like they used to. So you are going to have that dip. You are going to have them bad performances, and league positions don't show where you should be. But again, that's just football. That is life. There was nothing behind the scenes saying, "Oh my God, he's lost control. He's lost the dressing room." There was nothing along them lines.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned, anyway. Maybe other people think differently, but from my own personal view, granted, results weren't going our way or performances weren't, but there was nothing behind the scenes that would say there's a reason.
No, I have to second that. I don't think there's anything on the surface between us, the team, and everything else that was the indicator of what was going to happen. I think the decision was made by people who we don't know, and you know, the decision to get rid of him or whatever, it was out of our hands. But as far as we were concerned as a coaching staff and a playing staff, no. As you say, it's life. That's how it goes.
I was flabbergasted when he went. Yeah.
And after a while, you know, things do go wrong. It's just, to me, that was it. And again, I thought I was on my way, and the next minute I know Antonio Pintus is raving to me to Claudio Ranieri's fitness coach.
Yeah.
And I'm there again. So, you know.
Strange times, weren't they, lad? Really strange times. And Claudio, you know, Ranieri came in and he got Roman's money, and, you know, we blew the Champions League final there, didn't we, in Monaco? So we should have gone on to win that one, really.
Yeah. So
that's strange times.
But I just think that the foundations, as Mark's saying, the foundations were put in, and it, no matter, even when Roman came in, you would throw. You might have needed that money at the later stage, but Man City can show you they've just come in the cash injection, buy all the best players, but they still can't win the Champions League. And I think we maybe have done it. We did it a different way, and it took us longer to do it, but we did it the right way. You did it the footballing.
I often think, like, as a coach, as a manager, and bringing in a coach like Ray Wilkins with Vialli was fantastic. What a team them two were. And then Steve Clarke came in as a number 2 under Mourinho. And I could see that working at Harlington. You know, you boys weren't there when Mourinho came in, but it was absolutely brilliant. But I think now this is what Potter's missing. He needs a John Terry in there to just help him how the club's run and how it's done, and a bit of bite. You know what I mean? I don't know if you agree with me, Mark. You know, an old boy that knows the club.
Yeah, you do. But I believe at the moment, like we touched on earlier, I think a lot of it's coming from above at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And I know this is just my opinion, and everybody has an opinion in football, and we all know that. I'm not sure what's going on. I don't think these players are the ones that he wants.
He said that today.
Yeah, I also don't think that it was the right time for him to go there. I think a few more years or a bit more experience, and yes, definitely you need your John Terrys back there and coach, but the way that Chelsea are going forward, is that something that the owners want? Do they want to go a different direction? Nobody knows this because we're not behind the scenes. Yeah. So the owners are turning around and going, well, I don't want any of the ex-players here. The fans obviously do. The ex-players do obviously want to try and be involved and coach, like, you know, that Andy Myers and John Arley in the academy bringing boys forward. But the new owners might not want that. None of the fans know. And if it is a case that they've made a decision already that we want a fresh slate and we'll go our way, then that's what we got.
Gianluca was sacked on the 12th of September of 2000, gents, and we've sort of touched on sort of at that period where things were getting rocky. Was this a shock to you all when this occurred? And again, Mark, you said it beforehand that it didn't seem that anything was wrong in terms of what Vialli was doing on the training ground or any issues with players. Do you remember where you guys were when you heard the news, and sort of how did this sort of affect sort of yourselves sort of going forward in terms of the team, or in terms of like individually what would happen?
It's obviously always a shock for a manager to go. You know, no players are expecting it. As you well know, we might be flicking on Sky Sports in 20 minutes and Lampard could have gone. So you don't actually know. I to be honest with you, I don't know what was happening when it was announced. But at the time, I was in a sort of situation at the club where I was either going out on loan or I was in the reserves, etc., etc. But it's always a shock for any player to look at the news and he's gone. But it's a sad day, isn't it? You know, it's a sad day when Ruud Gullit went because he liked the player and I was playing. It's a sad day. If you're playing under Vialli and you're doing well and you've just signed a new contract and that manager goes, it's a sad day because now you've got to think, well, hold up a minute, the next manager might not come in and fancy me. So it's always difficult when a manager goes, you know, because you don't know what's coming in. You don't know how things are going to react. You don't know how your career is actually going to go. So
I think the downfall of Vialli was bringing in Winston Bogart and Chris Sutton. So I don't think they were good signings. They were awful. You know, I used to watch Bogart at Arlington. He used to turn up for 10 minutes, then go home. It was just comical. You know what I mean? It was really, really bad. Yeah, I don't know.
When you're being paid the money that he was being paid and he come over.
Yeah. He was on a lot of money, wasn't he?
50 grand a week he was on. Yeah, 50 grand. And he'd turn up at Arlington, Ade, you'd probably see it. He'd be out there for 10 minutes, didn't fancy it, and walk off. They couldn't do nothing with him. He was just a complete idiot, wasn't he?
There were rumours that he was injury prone and he came into Chelsea as somebody who was picking up injuries freely, and it was a case of, you know, he was basically protected himself like he was glass. You know, any sort of touch on him and he'd sort of break down. Was that true at all, or again was it somebody that just didn't fancy
Winston Bogart was not a Luca Vialli buy.
Winston Bogart was not a Vialli buy.
It wasn't a Vialli buy.
Who was it? Glenn Williams?
He was brought into the club. He was a free from Barcelona. He was released from Barcelona as a free, and Chelsea decided to pay his wages. They thought they were getting a world-class player for free. He came in, he wasn't Luca's player, and obviously Luca didn't fancy him. And obviously once he had the opportunity to play and train, you could see what Winston was about. Obviously you're picking the team, you're making the decisions who you want to play, represent Chelsea Football Club, and Winston wasn't in it. Then
do you think the board may have intervened with Vialli?
He then decided that if they're paying him this much money, he was one of the few, one of the few football players, I always say, because I used to come from athletics, I always used to say, would you as a player play football for free? Would you not get, if you were not getting your wages, would you play football? And that was always the question, because as an athlete, you would always run. You're not really worried about the money. You would just run because you enjoyed athletics. You would do it. Now, there are some players that would do it. No problem. There are some players that wouldn't. And Winston was one of those. If they didn't pay him, he wouldn't want to know. And so when it came to situation and they didn't fancy him, he was like, well, okay, fine. I'm getting my money. I'm not really bothered. So he used to live in Rotterdam, used to fly in on a Sunday, stay in Harlington, stay in London, Monday, Tuesday. He was training with the reserves, training with the youth team. He would shout at them because they didn't know what they were doing. And they were young guys. And the coach didn't want him shouting at all the guys because he was a disruptive influence. And so Winston ended up training on his own. And Winston then would travel home on a Wednesday because we had a day off. And Tuesday night, he'd travel home and he'd go back to Rotterdam and he'd fly back in from Rotterdam on the Wednesday night, and he'd be here all weekend. And that's all Winston used to do. Go backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. And I can say this because they used to dump him with me because he didn't want to try. They didn't want him being a disruptive influence in the club. They didn't want him to be disruptive influence to the young players, the first team, the reserve team. So they just used to go, okay, we're just going to leave you over there. We'll pay you your money and then you can go. Because Winston was that type of player.
Why was he disruptive, Ade? Tell me that. Why was he disruptive?
It was disruptive, okay. So for instance, if a young player made the wrong decision, instead of being encouraging to that player and tell him this is what you need to do, he'd shout.
Yeah.
And he'd be disruptive. He would destroy young players rather than encourage young players.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't be the type of person that would give. He was always destroying everybody around him. Instead of thinking about, I want you to get better, it's about me.
A bully.
So they didn't want him. Didn't want him around, but so they had to pay him because he'd signed on the dotted line. The club had signed on the dotted line, so they had to pay him. But he wasn't, as I said, I always used to ask that question: Would you play for free? And some would, some wouldn't. And he was one who didn't.
And he was
so
on a
he took
long
his money,
contract as
and
well.
off he went.
He was on a long contract. I believe it was when he
Yeah.
signed at the
2
time. It
years.
was like a 4-year deal, wasn't it?
Was it a 4-year deal?
I believe it was a 4-year.
I think it was 4 years.
Maybe
Yeah.
4-year deal. Because he wasn't a free, because he was a free from Barcelona. This is why it was such a long day. I think he played. I don't know how many games he played for Chelsea.
I can find out for you now. I've got the actual.
Because Bates brought him in then, not Vialli.
No, yeah. Well, see, I think it was Colin Hutchinson actually.
Yeah.
But he was a free, so it was a good deal from the club for the club. From the club's point of view, what you're getting, you're not having to pay any money up front for it. You're just having to pay his wages, and that's why it was a great business deal. But
it was a good
from
deal
a
for him.
point of view, maybe it wasn't so great.
No, it was a good deal for him.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Winston played 12 times for Chelsea.
Yeah. I'm
Well,
not surprised.
That's what you call it, yeah.
You think of me, right? You think
he
of
left
me.
in July of 2004.
Yeah.
Oh,
You
no.
think I played 32 years Sunday League football, and I paid £3 a week subs, and what he was on, unbelievable, wasn't it?
Hey, I'm fine. I'm just doing a podcast. Can I call you back? All right, I'll call you back in a minute. Bye then. Bye. Yeah.
Ade, you need to tell Winston not to call you while you're doing the podcast.
He's giving him a drink there.
Gentlemen, we will wrap this up quite shortly. In regards to Gianluca, obviously, he left Chelsea, but he certainly left his mark at the club, which is still ringing true today. And obviously, if we look from away from the football and on to Gianluca the man, he had a small stint at Watford. He decided to return to management, and he was there at Watford for the season. Unfortunately, he couldn't get Watford back into the first division. He only was there for a season, and then obviously he'd done his media duties. He was quite big in Italy doing his media work, and then you hear the news. Fast forward to the time when it was announced that Vialli was battling cancer for the first time. It was quite a bit of a shock to many people's systems, and got to a stage where we heard that Vialli got the all clear, which was again great news at the time. He was being treated at the Royal Marsden Hospital in London, and it was just again hoping that the worst was going to be behind him. And then he, as you said, he was given the all clear. It was April of 2020 from pancreatic cancer, but unfortunately, in the year after, he revealed in an interview that he'd be diagnosed with the disease for a second time. Obviously, he was lifting his spirits. There was one memory of him that I have. It was last time I saw him at Chelsea was the tribute to Ray Wilkins. It was the Legends game, Chelsea Legends versus Inter Milan, and Vialli was in the dugout. And although he weren't playing, he looked well at that point, and the fans, young and old. I was sitting in the West. I was sitting front row in the West Stand upper. Fans young and old were chanting Vialli, chanting these legends' names, and it was just fantastic, to see that. And then, as recent as a few weeks ago, you saw him. Before that, you saw him with Roberto Mancini. Italy winning the European Championship, and Vialli's in the dugout, and that smile, just his smile would just light up a room, and it lit up football pitches, even when he was in the dugout, with Roberto Mancini. And I know there was a few people a few friends of mine when Italy played England in the final. A lot of them obviously did want England to win, but a lot of them wanted Italy to win because it was Vialli. It was Vialli in the dugout, and they wanted Italy to win because of Vialli. And then you saw the photos, the videos of Vialli hugging Roberto Mancini when Italy won the European Championships, and you're
We
thinking,
all wanted England to win, but that was a magnificent moment, I thought.
yeah.
Very, very proud. Yeah.
And that was probably, if you look at his career from being player and from coach when he started at Chelsea to that point, would we agree, gentlemen, that was probably the pinnacle right there to be part of that coaching side, to win a European Championships for your country.
Yeah.
We'd say that was the pinnacle, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It has to be, doesn't it? Because if you think about it, if that's that is such a moment that is never going to be forgotten by anybody, is it? So that moment touched everybody, you know. And when you look back on it now, and we had the tribute and things like that, and you go onto your Twitter and your Facebook, I would say that's the pinnacle thing. It would have been, in my eyes, it would have been anyway.
And it was quite fitting. I was just going to say as well, it was quite fitting that it was at Wembley, knowing that Vialli had many memories, many good memories at Wembley.
Yeah,
whether
lovely.
it was the old, winning trophies with Chelsea. Again, I know with the tribute show, looking back on it now, it's quite fitting, and it's quite,
But you can see it. You could see it in his face when you got the picture of him and Mancini hugging. You can see it in his face how much it meant.
Yeah.
So when you see that picture, it tells me that in his own head that would have been the pinnacle as well.
Gotcha. Yeah. So
the man was a legend. What about that for a picture of me and Vialli at Arlington? You see that? Yeah. First day's training.
You got a picture of Dave?
Hey, you've seen that, mate. You on Facebook, Mark? Get on it, mate. You love my old photos.
I think Dave's got pictures of himself with every player.
I probably have from the good old days at Arlington.
It's before they sign the contract. It's as soon as they come out of the car and he's like, right, we'll get a picture with you. Right.
How much would my photos be worth, honestly? I've got whole history.
Shirts.
Yeah.
Madness. But
okay, question for you.
Go on.
I bet you'll be able to answer it, Dave. Who was the Italian Ryan Giggs?
Italian Ryan Giggs.
I know this one. Mark, you might know this one because I believe you played a couple of games with him as well, I think.
Oh, dear. Nah, stumped. I don't know.
Not Vialli.
I think I might have got him.
We'll have a coup. Go on.
Huh? You don't know?
Don't know. Go on.
I'm disappointed. I thought you would know. What's his name?
Gabriel.
Oh, you forgot it.
Ambrosetti.
Oh, you're joking. Ambrosetti. Oh, no. Ryan Giggs.
He was labelled as the Italian.
He was labelled as the Italian Ryan Giggs by Luca Vialli.
Really?
And he came and he was a disaster.
Yeah, he was. I didn't rate him one bit. He was another Winston Bogart.
Not as bad as that. Not as bad as that.
No, David, you can't say things like that. No. But we touched on Vialli's great moment at the new Wembley when Italy won it and won the European Championships. And then, Christ, fast forward, you hear sort of November 2021, it was around that time, you hear that the cancer's returned. And Gianluca, of course, was taking it more easy. He last year, that while Italy were doing the World Cup qualifiers, he would take a step back from his duties with Italy to carry on with his treatment. And you felt then, hopefully he would get through it a second time. And then, unfortunately, to kick off this year in 2023, we hear the news that Gianluca Vialli passed away. It was on the 6th of January, 2023.
Yeah.
Again, my God, it's no age. 58.
Yeah, I know. 58. And I'm older than him. It's scary.
And gents, I mean, again, we've touched on with Gianluca for the a good while now on this show, even this part, but this must have knocked seven bells out of all three of you to to put mildly, but it touched a lot of people. When you hear the stories of people's tributes on, as you said, Mark, earlier, about Twitter and Facebook and on Instagram, there was not a bad, you heard nobody say a bad word about him. Everybody had great memories, great stories of Gianluca, the man, the player, and it was just a real sad, horrible day that was.
Yeah,
Devastating.
I think all the words you've used and that we've used in this chat, obviously classy, respectful, gentleman, legend of football. You could go on with the superlatives for him. So, it's a sad day for football. It's a sad day for Chelsea fans and football fans around the world in general. No age, but in my view, I'll always have the memories of being on away trips, watching Match of the Day on a Saturday night when we've got a game on a Sunday. We're getting a cheese and ham toasty at 10:30 delivered to the room with a pint of blackcurrant and lemonade. Some people don't see this side of it or never heard these stories, but they happened, and you've only got good memories of him. There's, like you say, no bad words said about him, and it's all good feelings, It's all good memories, good feelings. So yeah, it's a sad day, but what a man, what a legend.
Yeah, I always thought he had a brilliant relationship with Dennis Wise as well, don't you, at Harlington? Them two were best of buddies, and they played well together, didn't they? And I'll never forget that ball, that Di Matteo put through to Wisey in the San Siro. I was behind that goal that night, and Vialli going mad on the touchline with Ray Wilkins, and now them two are in heaven. You know what I mean? Ray Wilkins and Vialli. Yeah, that was a real touching moment for me, and being behind that goal and watching them go mental, it was what a night that was in the San Siro. What a goal! And then I think, well, Vialli came home to win the Euros at Wembley, and then he's come home again to Kensington and Chelsea in the Royal Marsden Hotel and passed away. What a way to go! Unbelievable. I was devastated, but what a way to go! Lovely guy.
I have my own memories, like everybody else here. Great guy. We've said so many fantastic things about him. Everyone has their own memories of the guy, and they're all positive. For me, I got, it was really sad. As my ex-wife actually texted me to tell me, and I was like, I knew he was ill. I knew he had cancer, and oh my God, really? Yeah.
That's a lovely one for Vialli.
He has got so many photos. Look at
Do you remember Little Wembley where you used to train?
Yes, Little Wembley.
Whenever we played a cup final, we trained there, didn't we?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. It used to be grass. Then it went to AstroTurf.
I went to AstroTurf.
Okay. Yeah, but that was a special. Whenever they played at Wembley, they played at Little Wembley next to the school.
The very last.
They were great days. Yeah. And you knew you were at Wembley when they played there. You know what I mean? Yeah. That was a lucky omen, Mark, weren't it? That little pitch. Yeah. Used to do the team photos there as well, didn't you?
Yeah, it was lovely bit of grass.
That was better than the pitches at Arlington. Yeah, Mick used to look after that. I still see Mick, the groundsman, quite a bit when I go up there. So he's still there. Yeah. But no, they were lovely times, lovely memories with Hullet. Special memories of bringing in Hullet and then Vialli coming in and getting that photo, and total gentleman, absolutely brilliant. And then you get the likes of LeBeuf coming in, and they were great days, you know what I mean? And you talk about trophy winners, when LeBeuf won the World Cup, that's all you heard about from him at Arlington. He come out and used to give it to us about winning the World Cup, but they were great days.
And we have to point out as well, by the time this episode comes out, the touching tribute that Chelsea gave, and also his former clubs like Sampdoria and Juventus.
Yeah, fantastic.
Done some fantastic, tributes to him before games. Chelsea's, I thought, was superb. Mark, you was there with some of his former teammates and players that admired him. Obviously, David, I know you was there as well, and seeing seeing the crowd chant Vialli one more time, and you saw the tributes from the shed end and the Matthew Harding end, it just felt fitting, and it felt like a proper goodbye to
What a send off! It was great.
to an extraordinary man, and again, such a talented footballer that we spoke about it off the record, gentlemen. You don't get many strikers like that anymore.
No, he was up there with the Peter Osgoods. There's a statue out there of Osgood. You know what I mean? I watched Osgood as a kid, and he was magnificent. But Vialli was up there. His first touch as a player was unbelievable. Even you, Mark, you played with him, and his first touch was unbelievable as a footballer. He was just fantastic footballer. Yeah, great. And as a coach and as a manager as well, brilliant. And as you say, he would go and watch the juniors play after the first team trained, and he'd be there. You know what I mean? He was just brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and a sad loss to us all.
Gentlemen, we're coming to near the end. I just want to sort of get each of your final thoughts on Gianluca and how you would like to remember him. Whether it would be on the pitch, off the pitch, and if you've just sort of got maybe one to two little stories left that you'd like to share of the great man before we close this up. Ade, we'll start with you, buddy.
How do I say? Special man, special person. The fact that I invited him to my wedding says everything about him to me.
Oh, it must be special.
Yeah, and he's a special guy. Even from a playing point of view, even when he came from Italy, I remember, I think there's an interview where he says, "I just want to be a Chelsea legend," and he is.
Yeah.
He is. And I wasn't born in the era of Peter Osgood and so on and so forth. But yeah, he is a Chelsea legend of that time. Yeah. So for me, is a focal point of the growth of Chelsea Football Club, and he is a legend of Chelsea Football Club. Yeah, and has been treated as such.
Yeah, for me, I put a picture of the tribute on Sunday was fitting for the man, and I've got on my Twitter feed the two words that I used on that, and I think the only two words that I could use was gentleman and legend. That word gets used too often in football now. People throw it around willy-nilly, and sometimes I don't think it's the correct word for that person, but legend for that person is 100% true.
Yeah. And then I look at giving him, Mark Nicholls, his medal. I think, wow, that really hit me tonight a little bit. What a diamond that is. And also wrapping it up when the ball hits the back of the net, that's Vialli at Old Trafford. That is a fantastic song, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just when the ball hits at the back of the net, that's Vialli. Fantastic. Fitting. What a day that was.
Yeah. Very, very legend. Fitting. Listeners, thank you very much for taking the time to listen to us for reminisce about an extraordinary gentleman. And I'd like to give my personal thanks to my great guests, my distinguished guests, who, again, I'm hopeful that we will again chat all things Chelsea further down the road. My thanks to David. Again, thank you very much for your time. Ade, again, superb. My friend, thank you very much for being part of this great chat, and thank you to Mark Nicholls as well for taking the time out, travelling back from Colchester United's green today. Gentlemen, again, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, honestly, thank you very much, and this will be a very fitting tribute for the podcast. And
pleasure.
It's been fantastic.
Pleasure.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
See you later.
We should all meet up for a beer.